How is Bear 6080?
6080 is good. She weighed 131 pounds when we weighed her back in the end of February, and looking fine. She's a lowland bear. She likes to stick to the swamps and not hit hunters' baits, so she's always on the lighter side. She had two male cubs this year, so that was an exciting thing.
Any fresh surprises, I guess, this year? She was sort of one of the surprises last year. Anything you found that was unusual?
We're starting to trap more in the Brainerd and Baxter area. You know, bears in Minnesota migrate, and we had about half the bears migrate from the Brainerd area all the way up to Lake Winnibigoshish and the south side of Leech Lake, which is, we didn't know bears migrated north. We know they kind of shuffled around, but that was kind of the only new thing that we found this year. The bear population for the state of Minnesota is in a pretty good place right now. On the whole, it's stable to increasing. There are a few spots in the state where the population is still declining a little bit due to a couple of years of high harvest, but generally speaking, things are good. We've cut back permits in a few spots to help turn that population decline into stable and increasing again in a couple of years.
Conditions, since we saw you last for bears, we got a lot of snow this winter, or any other things that stood out to you that may impact them?
So 2022 was a great year. One of the best food years that we've had on record since we started tracking these things back in the 80s. We had choke cherries on the trees into deer season, which almost never happens. Really good blueberries, raspberries, basically everything across the board, except for if you were in kind of central Minnesota when that drought kicked in the fall. But if you were a bear, it was a great year to be a bear, munching on berries all summer, and then acorns and hazelnuts in the fall. And then that snow hit early, right around Christmas time, and gave them a nice thick blanket to help insulate them inside the den. And everything's been fine after that. It's no big surprises. Cub litter sizes are similar to always, and the bears we expected to have cubs all had cubs, so that was great.
I wonder about flooding because I believe that you and I talked about more bears are like nesting above ground for whatever reason, or at the time we talked they were. And I know we're looking at a potential, riskier flood season. So is that something that could impact them?
It doesn't affect them in the long term. Mostly they'll just get wet and then they'll have to move above ground, and they'll pick up the cubs by their scruff and carry them off just like a dog or a cat would. And they'll find a new nest. In fact, we did have one in the Reamer area. She was a solo bear with she wasn't anticipated to have any cubs or anything. But we did have that nice warm stretch there, and it certainly did get a little flooded out in her den. And so she just moved about 500 yards away into a brush pile in a wetland and is hibernating the rest of her winter there.
I also believe we talked about you were seeing more bears closer to the Twin Cities. That was last year, though. What are you seeing in terms of that now?
The north end of the Twin Cities, and even to some extent the eastern edge of the Twin Cities, and we had some bear reports out in Eden Prairie as well, kind of by Purgatory Creek. And so that's becoming kind of secondary bear range now. Bear sightings are more common. Plus, lots of people have those camera systems on. So the bears are set to wake up in about another month or so. So it's incumbent on folks to start thinking about pulling their bird feeders in once about tax day or so comes, and making sure their trash is secured. So bears can be bears and they don't get in trouble with folks. And the other thing is that, as folks are getting ready to open up the cabins, once the snow goes away, um, a helpful website they can go to for lots of tips for information on how to coexist with bears is bearwise.org. This is a national program with clear, consistent messaging for how to coexist with bears. It's written by bear biologists, it's vetted by bear biologists, and it's in a nice, clear, consistent manner. So bearwise.org or Minnesota DNR Living with Bears in a Google search will get you there.